100 years ago, if you wanted to describe someone impossibly wealthy in Paris, you didn't say rich as a king. You said, rich comme un Argentin, rich as an Argentine. In 1913, Argentina was one of the 10 richest countries on earth per person, wealthier than France, wealthier than Germany, twice as wealthy as Japan. It has some of the finest farmland on the planet, enough beef and wheat to feed continents. And since then, this same country has defaulted on its national debt 9 separate times, a world record for a major economy. Argentina is the greatest economic mystery of the modern age, not how a poor country stays poor, but how a rich one keeps choosing to go broke. Today on the Money Atlas, the country that fell from the top of the world and the machine that keeps pushing it back down. Quick thing before we dig in. If you enjoy stories that make the world make sense, subscribing is the best way to see the next one, and it costs you nothing. All right, let's get into it. 9 defaults. Read the years like a heartbeat. 1827. 1890, a default so big it nearly destroyed Barings, the Bank of the British Empire. 1951, 1956, 1982, 1989, 2001, the largest sovereign default in history at the time. 2014, 2020, no other major economy comes close. Lending to Argentina has been described as the world's most reliable way to lose money. And yet, investors keep coming back, because every generation convinces itself that this time, Argentina has changed. To understand why it never quite does, you have to start at the top. Because Argentina's problem was never that it lacked wealth. It's what it learned during the years it had too much of it. Here is the world of 1913. Argentina, richer per person than France. Far richer than Italy, which is why millions of Italians boarded ships not for New York but for Buenos Aires. Nearly 3 times richer than Japan. The capital built opera houses and boulevards to rival Paris. Harrods opened its only foreign branch there. Argentina wasn't an emerging market. It was the developed world, the Australia or Canada of the South, a young, resource-rich democracy that everyone assumed would own the 20th century, which raises the question that economists have been arguing about for 100 years. What on earth happened? First, understand the gift. The Pampas, a plain of deep, rich topsoil the size of Texas, with perfect rainfall, no need for fertilizer, made for cattle and wheat. Argentines joke that God was so generous with their land that, to balance things out, he filled it with Argentines. In 1900, that generosity was the whole business model. Europe was hungry, Argentina fed it, and the money poured in. But an economy built on selling what the land gives you has a hidden weakness. The money arrives whether or not you build institutions to handle it. Argentina got rich before it got stable, and wealth without stability is just a bigger thing to fight over. The fighting started in 1930 when the army overthrew the elected government, the first of 6 coups in 50 years. Once power could be seized instead of won, economics became warfare. Every government spent big to buy loyalty before the next crisis. Then came Juan Perón in 1946, the towering figure of Argentine history. He gave workers real wages, pensions, holidays, and paid for it by closing the economy, nationalizing industries, and spending the country's entire wartime fortune in a few years. Peronism became the software of Argentine politics, and it has one core instruction: spend now. The bill can always be someone else's problem. And that instruction built the machine, the one that explains almost everything else in this story. It works like this. The government spends more than it collects. Nobody will lend to it cheaply, see those 9 defaults, so the central bank simply prints the difference. More pesos chasing the same goods means prices rise. Rising prices make voters angry, so the government spends even more to soften the blow: subsidies, wage hikes, price freezes, which deepens the deficit, which means more printing. Argentina has run this exact loop, with brief pauses, for 75 years. It's not a mystery, it's a flywheel. Want to see 75 years of that flywheel in a single number? Since 1970, Argentina has redenominated its currency 5 times, each time slicing zeros off the banknotes to make the numbers manageable again. Total zeros removed: 13. 1 peso today equals 10 trillion pesos of 1970. That is not a typo. 10 trillion. If you had held Argentine cash continuously since then, a fortune the size of a national budget would have melted into the price of a coffee. This is why the first lesson every Argentine child absorbs, before algebra, before history, is this: never, ever store your savings in pesos. The flywheel hit maximum speed in 1989. Hyperinflation, over 3,000% in a single year. The stories from that winter sound invented, but they're documented. Supermarket clerks walking the aisles announcing price increases over megaphones while people shopped. Restaurants where the bill depended on whether you paid before or after dessert. Workers sprinting to spend their salary within hours of receiving it, because by Friday it would buy half as much. Money is a shared story, and in 1989, Argentina simply stopped believing it. The country needed a miracle, and in 1991, it thought it had found one. The miracle was called convertibility. 1 peso equals $1 fixed by law, every peso backed by a real dollar in the central bank. Printing money became legally impossible. The flywheel was welded shut, and it worked. Inflation collapsed from thousands of percent to nearly zero in 2 years. Investment flooded in. For most of the 90s, Argentina was the IMF star pupil, the proof that discipline could be imported. But a currency board is a deal with the devil. You give up the printing press, and in exchange, you can never devalue, even when you desperately need to. Argentina had cured inflation by handcuffing itself to the mast. Then the storm came. At the end of the 90s, the dollar soared, dragging the handcuffed peso up with it. Argentine beef and wheat became wildly overpriced, exports collapsed, recession set in. A country with its own currency would devalue. Argentina legally couldn't, so it borrowed. And borrowed. By December 2001, the money ran out. The government froze every bank account in the nation. The corralito, the little corral, and desperate savers hammered on bank doors with pots and pans. Riots killed dozens. The country went through 5 presidents in 2 weeks, and the 4th one announced, to applause in Congress, the largest sovereign default in world history, $95 billion. The miracle ended in the corral. What followed is the part that breaks economists' hearts. The machine simply restarted. Devaluation, then printing, then inflation, then subsidies, then deficit. Argentina defaulted again in 2014 on a technicality involving a New York judge, and again properly in 2020. By 2023, annual inflation had reached 211%, prices tripling every year. The central bank's reserves were effectively zero. Argentina, the country that was richer than France, now had inflation worse than war zones. And its citizens responded the only rational way they knew how, by getting their money out of pesos, at any cost, forever. Which brings us to Argentina's true national currency, the US dollar. Argentines are estimated to hold over $200 billion in cash under floorboards, in safe deposit boxes, in Miami accounts. More physical American dollars than any population outside the United States itself. Buy an apartment in Buenos Aires, and you may pay in literal bricks of $100 bills, counted by machine in a private cave, a currency dealer's back room. Think about what that means. The citizens of Argentina long ago defaulted on their own currency. The peso is for spending this week. The dollar is for surviving. No trust, no savings, no savings, no investment, no escape. So why can't anyone just stop the machine? Because every exit is politically radioactive. Cutting spending means firing workers and slashing pensions today. Ending money printing means a brutal recession today. The rewards, stability, investment, growth arrive years later, probably during someone else's presidency. Argentine voters have watched a dozen stabilization plans collapse, so they discount every promise. And politicians, knowing they'll be blamed for the pain but not credited for the gain, always find printing one more peso cheaper than telling one hard truth. It is a trap made not of economics, but of memory. Then, in December 2023, Argentina elected a man with a chainsaw. Javier Milei, a wild-haired economist who campaigned waving an actual chainsaw as a promise to cut the state. Whatever you think of his politics, the numbers 2 years in are startling. Inflation down from 211% to around 30%, the lowest in 7 years. The first sustained fiscal surplus in decades, the economy growing above 4% in 2025. The flywheel, for the first time in a generation, is visibly slowing. But the peso is still fragile, the reserves are still thin, and Argentina has seen hopeful chapters before. Every previous miracle lasted exactly as long as the discipline behind it. Remember Switzerland from our first episode? A country with nothing that got rich selling one invisible product: trust. Argentina is the perfect mirror image. A country with everything that spent a century burning that exact product. 9 defaults are 9 broken promises, and each one raised the price of every future promise. That's the real answer to the mystery. Argentina never lacked resources, talent, or opportunity. It lacked the boring, unglamorous thing, institutions that outlive the government of the day. The Pampas will always grow wheat back next season. Trust is the only crop that doesn't regrow. And that is the tragedy and the warning of Argentina, nature's most gifted economy, permanently one broken promise away from greatness. The farmland never left. The people never stopped being brilliant. The only thing that ever collapsed was the word of the state. If this changed how you think about wealth, do 3 quick things. Tap like so more people find the video. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And turn on notifications, because next time we tell the story of the single most boring object in the world economy: a steel box. A box that destroyed entire cities of jobs, made globalization physically possible, and moves 90% of everything you own. The shipping container, the box that ate the world, all the sources are in the description. This has been the Money Atlas. See you in the next one.